Welcome back to Blacklit Memory. Tonight, I've got 4 Appalachian horror stories about people who thought they were alone and found out they weren't. A cellar door that speaks with your voice. A photograph wedged in a tree that shouldn't be there. A barefoot child who walks the roadside curves. And boots that leave footprints you didn't make. These aren't stories about legends. They're about the cracks in reality, the ones you only notice when it's too late. If you're new here, go ahead and like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments. Have you ever looked back at a photo and seen something that wasn't there before? Now, wherever you are, keep a door closed and keep your name to yourself. It's time to begin. I moved into the cabin in early August, thinking the quiet would help. After the divorce, I didn't want the city anymore. Charlotte felt too fast, too loud, full of places I used to go with people I didn't talk to anymore. The cabin had been my Aunt Luann's, tucked deep in a patch of woods near Knoxville. The kind of place where cell service blinked in and out like a bad memory. She'd left it to me in her will. Even though I hadn't seen her since I was a teenager, I didn't question it. I packed the car, told Riley I'd call every night, and promised myself I wasn't running, I was regrouping. I was 37, a freelance editor with a backlog of memoirs and a head full of static. My daughter was with her father for now, just until I got settled. But that didn't stop the guilt from curling up beside me at night. I told myself it was for the best, no school in the area, no kids nearby, but sometimes that reasoning cracked in the early hours. When I saw her cereal bowl still stacked in the drying rack or her rain boots by the door. I talked to her every other night, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she was slipping away a little more each time. So I kept busy coffee at 7, editing by 8, and long walks through the woods just before lunch, where the trees felt older than time and the quiet was thick enough to lean against. The first strange thing was the curtain, just a little red gingham thing over the kitchen window, old-fashioned, nothing special. I made a habit of pulling it shut every night before bed. A small ritual that made me feel like I was in control of something. But each morning, it was open again. Not wide, just an inch or so, pulled back like someone had taken a peek. I thought maybe the rod was slipping, or maybe I was misremembering. But I started double-checking. Even snapped a photo one night, just to prove to myself I wasn't imagining it. Then there was the trail. I didn't notice it at first. The grass out back was tall and uneven, so it was easy to miss the subtle flattening near the tree line. But day by day, the faint impression became clearer, a narrow path leading from the woods to the back steps. It didn't look like an animal trail. Too straight, too careful. I stopped walking out there after that. Started locking the back door, even in the afternoon, and kept the porch light on long after I went to bed. That was when the sounds began. Just after midnight most nights, I'd be lying in bed with a podcast playing low, and I'd hear them soft footfalls across dry leaves, slow and deliberate, circling the cabin like someone unsure where the front door was. I froze the first time, held my breath, and paused the audio. The silence that followed was louder than the footsteps. I waited 5 minutes, maybe 10, before the sound came again, even softer this time, like it knew I was listening. I told myself it was just a deer, maybe a raccoon, but it didn't feel like an animal. It felt like someone pacing, deciding. It wasn't until the footprints that I stopped trying to explain it away. We'd had a light rain overnight. And in the morning, I spotted them just off the back porch, 4, maybe 5 muddy impressions. Small, too small for an adult, but the shape was wrong for a child's foot. They weren't barefoot, and they weren't in shoes either. I crouched down to get a better look, and my stomach dropped. The tread was the same as my hiking boots, the ones I hadn't touched in days. I checked the soles to be sure. They matched. A few days earlier, Mrs. Jilly, the neighbor who lived up the road, had brought over a loaf of banana bread and stayed long enough to talk about the woods. I'd asked, offhand, if kids ever came through the area, or if people hiked back behind the property. She gave me a long look and said, "If the woods want you to look, they'll part the veil for you." I laughed like it was a joke. She didn't. And then, at 2:03 a.m. on a Wednesday, I woke up to knocking. 3 slow, solid thuds at the back door. I didn't move at first, just lay there, heart pounding, staring at the ceiling. The sound was steady, like someone giving me time to answer. I grabbed my flashlight, crept down the hall, and pressed my ear to the door. Nothing. I flicked on the porch light, opened the curtain. No one. But the trail in the grass was clearer than ever, and this time it ended at the bottom step. I opened the door, leaned out just far enough to shine the light down. The footprints were back fresh, damp, sharp, same tread, same size, mine. I hadn't stepped outside in 3 days. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. I stayed curled in the corner of the couch with every light on. The flashlight still gripped in my hand like it might matter. I checked the door twice an hour, half expecting the knocking to return, but it didn't. Nothing moved out there. Yet the quiet wasn't comforting anymore. It felt like the woods were holding their breath, waiting for me to do something. By morning, the prints had dried and faded, but I could still see them if I looked close. I thought about calling someone Jilly, maybe, or the sheriff's office. But what would I say, hey? Someone's walking around at night in my boots. And also the forest might be watching me. I told myself it was a prank. Some kid from town messing around. Though I knew that didn't make sense. No kid would be that patient. And besides, how would they have gotten hold of my boots without opening the door? I moved the boots to the hallway closet and wedged a chair under the back doorknob. Even though the deadbolt was fine, I stopped going for walks. I kept editing during the day, but I couldn't focus. Words blurred, deadlines slipped. Every little sound turned my head, branches knocking the siding. A bird landing on the railing, even the wind through the chimney. It was like my body had tuned to a different frequency, one where everything was threat-shaped. A few days passed with nothing new. And for a moment, I let myself believe it was over. Then the curtain was open again, wider this time. The trail had fresh bends in the grass, clearer, deeper. That night, just after 2 a.m., I woke up again, not from sound, but from the feeling, like I was being watched. I lay still for a long time, eyes fixed on the dark shape of the ceiling fan, willing myself not to get up. But I did. I crept to the kitchen, barefoot on cold planks. I didn't turn on any lights. I just eased the curtain aside, heart slamming in my chest like it was trying to warn me. The yard was empty. No movement, No prints I could see in the dark. But I had the same sixth sense as before, that something had just been there, that I'd missed it by seconds. I shut the curtain again, tighter this time, and shoved a chair under the kitchen door too. That morning, I found something new. Not outside. Inside. A faint smear of mud on the floor just past the back door. Not a print exactly, more like someone had brushed past the wall. Left a trace. I checked every window, every lock. Nothing was broken. The boots were still in the closet, but the laces were undone. I hadn't touched them since I hid them. I felt something in my throat then. Something like panic, but deeper. Older, like my body understood something my mind couldn't accept. I didn't leave the cabin for the rest of the day. I kept every curtain closed and the TV on. Even though I wasn't watching it, I called Riley that night, just to hear her voice. She sounded tired. I tried to keep my own voice steady, but I could hear it in her silence. She knew something was wrong. I didn't tell her. I just said I missed her and that I'd be home soon. I didn't believe it. At 2:03 a.m., on the fifth night, the knocking returned. 3 slow knocks. Same rhythm, same pause between. But this time, I didn't go to the door. I just sat in the hallway, flashlight in hand, staring at the seam of light under the kitchen door. Something brushed the porch outside. I heard it, a faint scuff on the boards, like a heel turning. Then nothing. Minutes passed, an hour maybe. I didn't move until the sun came up. I found nothing new that morning. No prints, no smear, no trail. Everything looked normal. But something had changed. I felt it in the air, like a thread pulled too tight. That afternoon, I drove into town, bought a second deadbolt, and installed it myself. I thought about sleeping in the car that night. I didn't. I sat up instead, flashlight in my lap, waiting. The knocks didn't come again, but the curtain was always open, every morning, no matter what I did. I stopped trying to shut it, and the trail in the grass, it never disappeared. Just got fainter, like whoever used it didn't need it anymore. Sometimes now, when I walk past a mirror, I check my reflection twice. I'm afraid I won't match. I still haven't worn those boots. I don't think they'd fit quite right anymore. I took the night shift for the bonus. That stretch between Asheville and Johnson City paid extra when you took it after midnight, especially in the rain. Dispatch didn't care that the roads were coiled like a snake through the hills, or that half the GPS signals went dead past Bakersville. They just wanted the cargo there by dawn. No excuses. And I needed the money. My son's surgery wasn't going to wait. And we were still a few thousand short after the insurance capped out. I've been a long-haul driver for almost 20 years. 42 now. I've slept in more truck stops than beds, and could probably tell you which counties have the worst vending machine coffee blindfolded. I don't complain, not out loud. But I also don't forget things, especially not the time I dozed off behind the wheel 5 years ago, just for a second, and ended up jackknifed into a guardrail. No one got hurt, but since then, I've done everything by the book: energy drinks, cold air blasting, radio turned to static if it keeps me sharp. It was past 1 when the fog thickened. I was hugging the curves along a ridge I didn't recognize. even though I'd driven this run a dozen times. The GPS stuttered, rerouted, then froze altogether. The map showed me drifting in and out of nowhere, the blue line twisting into empty green. I slowed down, flipped the high beams, and caught a glimpse of old fencing to the right split rail, covered in moss. It looked too even to be random, like it was marking something. The rain started up again. Not hard, just steady enough to blur the windshield and smear the reflections. I passed a rusted sign that I couldn't read, and a minute later, the road shifted from pavement to wood. I actually felt it, the hollow drum of tires on slats. A wooden bridge, narrow and long. No name posted, no railing worth trusting. I tapped the brakes, crept forward, heart picking up. This bridge wasn't on any route I knew, and it sure as hell wasn't on the map. Then I saw him, a kid, standing still at the far end of the bridge, right where the road curved back into the trees. Couldn't have been more than 8 or 9. Barefoot, pale, drenched, just standing there with his arms at his sides, staring into the cab. I hit the horn once, sharp. He didn't flinch. I was too far in to turn around, and even if I could, the bridge was too narrow. So I did what I had to. I slowed to a crawl and rolled toward him, waiting for him to move. He didn't. Not until I was maybe 10 feet away. Then, just like that, he turned and walked off the side, not like he fell, like he stepped into nothing. One moment he was there, next moment gone. I slammed the brakes, cursed, and threw the door open. Rain hit me like needles as I stumbled to the edge. Nothing, no splash, no sound. Just black trees and the dark drop of the ravine below. I stood there a long minute, soaked, heart punching against my ribs, trying to make sense of what I saw. Maybe he slipped. Maybe I hallucinated him altogether. I walked the length of the bridge twice. No footprints. Nothing but wet wood and my own breath fogging the air. I got back in the cab, shaking, and started rolling again. I told myself I was overtired, that the road played tricks sometimes, especially in the dark. But 20 minutes later, I spotted something on the windshield. At first, I thought it was dirt, but when I pulled off and hit the wipers, it didn't smear. It was inside, on the glass, just above the dash, 2 small, muddy prints, the kind a barefoot kid might leave if he climbed up and leaned in to look. I kept driving. What else was I going to do? Pull over and sleep with muddy footprints staring me down. From inside the glass, my hands stayed tight on the wheel, eyes flicking between the road and the mirrors. Every sound in the cab, the creak of the seat, the hum of the heater felt like it was trying to turn into something else. I didn't dare speak aloud, didn't turn the radio back on. I just kept rolling forward, waiting for daylight to break the spell. Only it didn't. The sun should have come up by then. I checked the dashboard clock twice. It said 3:41 a.m. Both times. I told myself it must have glitched, maybe moisture in the wires. Something simple. But my phone said the same. Time had stopped somewhere along that ridge, and I was still crawling through it. Headlights carving through a road I couldn't place. Fog thick as smoke on both sides. I kept thinking about the boy, how calm he'd looked. Not scared, not lost, just there, like he was supposed to be, like I was the one out of place. The words Jilly once told me in a diner parking lot floated up out of nowhere. If you see a barefoot child by the road, don't ask their name. She'd laughed after she said it, but not with her eyes. That was years ago. I hadn't thought about it since. I finally stopped at a pull-off near an old logging road. Killed the engine. Let the silence settle. I was shivering even with the heater off. I reached for the dash cam. Half out of instinct. It runs constantly, saving the last hour in a loop. I figured if I watched the footage, saw the boy again, real, solid. On screen, it might feel less like madness. I played it back. The bridge appeared, the curve, the rain. But there was no boy, no figure in the road, no one walking off the edge, just empty space. My own voice muttering, "Jesus," as I hit the brakes. And then, right after the cab stops, you can hear it. Light footsteps, inside the cab, not boots, bare feet, running from the passenger side to behind the driver's seat. Quick, soft, wet. I dropped the camera. It clattered to the floor. For a long time. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just stared at the mirror over my head, waiting for something to show in the back. But there was nothing. The cab was still. The rain had stopped. When I finally started the engine again, the time jumped to 6:12 a.m. Just like that. Sunlight broke over the trees. The GPS blinked back to life and rerouted me toward Johnson City like nothing had happened. The road was dry. The wooden bridge didn't appear on the map, just a straight line through green. No curve, no ravine, just forest. I made the delivery, didn't talk to anyone, drove back in silence. No music, no calls. That night, I parked the truck, took a cab home, and sat on the edge of my bed until sunrise. I haven't driven that road again. I don't take night shifts now, even when the money's good. My dispatcher thinks I'm just tired. And maybe I am, but I still check my windshield every morning, just in case the prints come back. I've been solo camping for 3 days now, deep in the Blue Ridge, chasing fog and golden hour light like it's a religion. My tent's pitched on a mossy patch of flat ground about half a mile off the marked trail, far enough to lose the chatter of weekend hikers. Close enough that I won't get completely screwed if I twist an ankle. I've got freeze-dried meals, a water filter, 3 backup batteries for my gear, and a small notebook with a checklist that's equal parts photo ideas and motivational quotes. The magazine editor I'm pitching wants untouched Appalachian wilderness, and I'm determined to give her something that feels raw, wild, maybe even a little lonely. That's the part that scares me most, the loneliness, but I need this. I need to prove I can do it alone. My name's Rachel Tien. I'm 26, and I've been freelancing full-time for just over a year. Nature shots are my thing, trees and fog, birds mid-flight, the way morning light catches on wet leaves. I've shot some decent stuff, mostly for smaller sites and blogs. But this is the first time I've gone all in on something for me. No backup, no partner waiting at the next campsite. Just me, my camera, and a stretch of quiet woods so still it feels like it's waiting for something. The days are straightforward. Wake with the light. Shoot while the mist still hangs into the hollows. Boil water for instant coffee, then hike, scout, shoot again. I take notes when the light hits just right. Mark GPS pins for potential return shots, and talk out loud sometimes just to hear a voice. Nights are harder. The woods creak and breathe. I hear owls, coyotes, branches falling. Normal stuff. But last night, I thought I heard something different. A sound like fabric brushing against bark. Like someone walking in a long skirt, slow and careful. This morning, I found the photograph. It was stuck in the bark of a dead birch tree, like someone had wedged it there on purpose. A Polaroid, edges curled, the colors faded to a pale green and brown haze. At first, I thought it was just a landscape shot, trees, ground, nothing else. But then I saw her, a woman, off-center, half-shadowed by a trunk, long hair, pale dress, head tilted like she'd been caught mid-step. No date on the back, no name, just that fixed, blurry stare. I took a picture of the Polaroid before putting it back, because something about it felt wrong in my pack, like I might bring her with me if I carried it. Later, when I went to reset my tripod near the clearing, it had moved. Not knocked over, moved. 3 feet to the left of where I left it, legs still extended, stable like someone had placed it there deliberately. I stood there for a full minute, trying to remember if I'd moved it myself. I hadn't. I would have written it down if I had. That's when I realized the sound I heard last night, the rustling, it had been close to the clearing, right near where the tripod stood. I told myself it was an animal. Wind, my own exhaustion. But when I checked the SD card, the shots from the previous evening were off, in 2 frames, taken seconds apart. There was a dark shape in the trees behind me, blurry, indistinct, almost like a smudge or shadow, but with the faint curve of a shoulder. I increased the contrast. The shape didn't go away, it deepened, defined. It looked like the outline of a woman in a dress. I packed up for the night faster than usual, skipping the second round of sunset shots. I told myself I was just tired, that I'd see it differently in the morning. But even now, writing this by flashlight, zipped into my tent with the sounds of night thick around me, I can't shake the feeling that I'm not alone out here. Like something saw me find the photo, like it's waiting for me to take one more picture. I broke camp the next morning, earlier than planned. I didn't sleep much, and when I did drift off, I dreamed of walking through trees that kept shifting behind me, never letting me turn around. My gear went into the pack in record time. Tent collapsed, tripod folded, battery bank stuffed in with no care for the usual cable tangle rules. I kept checking over my shoulder as I hiked back to the trailhead. Nothing followed, but the woods felt attentive, like I'd interrupted something that wanted me gone. Back in the city, it all felt absurd. The traffic, the noise, the smell of hot concrete, it was a kind of reset. I half laughed at myself, unloading the gear in my apartment, trying to remember why I'd been so spooked. The Polaroid, probably a stage joke. The tripod, maybe I did move it and forgot. The silhouette, I told myself it was a trick of the light. Moisture on the lens, wind in the branches. I didn't really believe it, but I needed to. I waited 2 days before touching the camera again. When I finally sat down to review and edit, I worked through the shots like normal, sorting them by time of day. Lighting conditions, focus. Most were what I expected, sharp, clean, promising. A few needed cropping. A few had that breathy, mist-filtered glow I love. But then I hit the final set, my last shots from that third night, taken right before I packed it in. One frame stopped me cold. I'd taken a self-timer shot, a habit of mine to track my camp setups for personal notes, tent in the background. Me crouching near the cookpot. Nothing artistic, just documentary. But in this one, right behind me, partially obscured by the tree line, there was someone standing. A woman. Hair long and dark, dress pale, trailing slightly in the leaves. Her face wasn't turned toward the camera. It was turned toward me. I froze. I checked the timestamp. It was the exact moment I thought I heard the rustling just after I'd started boiling water. I flipped back to the Polaroid image on my phone. The one I'd snapped of the photo in the tree bark. The woman was the same. Same posture, same long shape, same fabric, like she'd been waiting in that exact spot for decades. And I had just caught her in frame again. I scoured the next few shots, but she wasn't in them. Just that one. And even when I zoomed in until the pixels turned soft at the edges, her outline held, crisp, centered, like the camera had focused on her instead of me. I should have deleted it, should have wiped the whole card. But I didn't. I just closed the laptop and backed away like it might lunge at me. That night, I didn't sleep. I kept thinking about the old saying I'd heard from a ranger once while hiking in Shenandoah. If you find their photo, they're not from here anymore. He'd said it with a wink, a local joke. But now I kept wondering if they're not from here. Where did they go? And what happens when you take their picture again? A week passed. I stopped editing. Couldn't look at the image without feeling cold in my spine. But every now and then, I'd swear I saw her again in reflections, in the shape of someone walking ahead of me on the sidewalk before vanishing around the corner. I started keeping the camera zipped in its bag. Even bought a new SD card. Told myself I'd start a fresh project. But last night, while I was organizing prints for another pitch, I noticed something. In a photo I'd taken weeks before the trip, a shot of my apartment wall. Testing light from a new lamp, there was a smudge in the mirror behind me. Small, humanoid. Faint. I didn't remember it being there. I bought the house for $18, 000 cash, which tells you just about everything you need to know. Half-rotted porch, broken windows, raccoon nests in the attic. Nobody else had touched it in a decade. Maybe longer. But the bones were solid. And that's all I needed. I'm a carpenter by trade, 33. Mostly flipping cheap places on the edge of nowhere. Doing the work myself to keep costs low. This one sat at the end of a dead road outside Marion, Virginia. Backed right up against the woods like it was trying to vanish. I didn't tell anyone how bad things had gotten. Credit cards maxed, rent behind. I slept in the house from day one, no furniture, just a sleeping bag on the floor and a space heater I moved room to room. Soup from cans. Coffee from a dented percolator I'd found at a yard sale. My plan was simple. Fix it fast, flip it cheap, and dig myself out of the hole before anyone noticed I'd fallen in. The cellar door was out back, sunk into the slope behind the kitchen, rusted over, sealed tight with mesh and what looked like old concrete patch. Someone had gone through the trouble of covering every seam, every edge, like they were trying to keep something inside. I figured it was rot. Or rats. First week, I didn't think about it much. I was too busy replacing joists, cleaning mold off drywall, and hauling out piles of junk so old it looked fossilized. But on the seventh night, I heard it. A soft creak, metals shifting just once. I sat up in the dark, holding my breath, thinking maybe the wind had kicked up or a branch had fallen. But when I stepped out with my flashlight, the trees were still, and the yard was silent. I walked around back. The cellar door looked the same, sealed, but I noticed a new crack in the patchwork concrete thin, just a hairline running across the top lip. I made a mental note to reinforce it later and went back inside. Each day after that, I noticed more of them. Little cracks forming at the seams, the kind that spider out when concrete starts to give, slow and steady. I told myself it was the cold, freeze-thaw patterns, natural erosion. But by the third week, the mesh had started to bow outward just slightly, like pressure was building behind it. I didn't tell anyone, didn't post about it on the home Reno forums. Just kept working, hammering, sanding, painting, avoiding the backyard after dark. Then the creaking came back, always at night, never more than once, just that faint, metallic groan, long and low, like something shifting weight behind the door. I didn't sleep much those nights. Sat up in the half-finished living room with my boots still on, a crowbar resting across my lap. I started eating dinner by the front window just so I could see both entrances at once. The night I found the whisper was the night I set up the trail cam. Not a fancy one, just an old model I'd used for watching raccoons on a different job site. I aimed it at the cellar door before sunset, checked the battery, and left it running. I didn't expect much. But the next morning, when I scrolled through the footage, I saw the door shift. It didn't swing open, not fully, just inched forward, like someone had pushed gently from beneath. Mesh flexed. The crack along the top edge deepened. Then came the sound barely audible under the static. A whisper, right at the 10-second mark. My voice. Just one word, help. I played the clip 10 times, trying to convince myself the voice wasn't mine. But it was. Same drawl, same clipped edge when I say my H's. I hadn't said that word out loud in weeks, not even to myself. I sat there in the unfinished living room, trail cam in one hand, coffee untouched on the windowsill, listening to that whisper over and over, like it might change if I just caught it at the right second. It didn't. Just that single word, soft, pleading, like it came from the bottom of a well. I didn't go out back that day. Couldn't. I worked on the kitchen instead, keeping the radio on loud and every light blazing even though it was midday. Every thud of my hammer, every creak of floorboard under my boots made me flinch. My hands shook when I reached for the tape measure. I kept telling myself it had to be a glitch. Maybe I'd spoken near the mic the night I set it up. And the cam had somehow looped it. That would have made sense. It didn't feel like the truth. That night, the creaking started earlier. I was still brushing drywall dust off my jeans when I heard it longer this time. Deeper. Like metal flexing under slow weight. I opened the back door just enough to peek out. Porch light buzzed weakly, casting a sick yellow cone over the yard. I couldn't see the cellar from there, just the edge of the slope, the faint suggestion of concrete beyond the grass. But I didn't go closer. I shut the door and locked both bolts. I dreamed of voices that night. Not words, just breathy fragments, like someone trying to speak through cracked glass. I woke up twice, thinking someone was standing over me. But each time it was just the dark and the outline of half-taped windows. In the morning, I found the crowbar leaned against the back door. I hadn't touched it since the night before. I kept it beside my sleeping bag after that. 2 nights later, I worked up the nerve to check the cellar again. Just after dawn, trail cam in hand. Crowbar looped through my belt. The mesh was torn not cleanly, but frayed in spots like something had clawed at it. The patchwork concrete around the seam had started crumbling, leaving jagged edges and dust in the grass. The door itself was open maybe 2 inches, just enough to see that the inside was darker than dark. No scent, no sound, just stillness. I didn't touch it. I set the cam again and backed away, boots crunching too loud on dead leaves. That night, I waited by the window like usual. Lights off this time, crowbar across my knees. No creaking, no whispering. Just whine through the trees and the occasional scrape of a branch against the siding. I almost let myself believe it was over. The cam proved otherwise. Next morning, I played the footage before I even made coffee. Just past midnight, the door opened. Not all the way, maybe a foot. Enough to see something shift inside. A shape, low to the ground, crawling. Didn't come out, but just before the video cut off. Something brushed the lens. Not a hand, not an animal. More like fabric. Thin, stiff, dragging like wet canvas. Then the whisper again. This time it said, "I'm still down here." It was my voice, and I believed it.